Welcome to Crime Most French, a weekly podcast taking you through intriguing cases carried out on French soil. Researched and narrated by Cedric and rudely interrupted by me, Melanie. We're the true crime podcast on the lines. Crack open le vin and let the mayhem commence.
Okay, so this week we're going to talk about what was referred to in the press as the perfect murder. It is the murder of Laetitia Toureaux in the subway in Paris on the 16th of May 1937.
What I want to know is what number line was it?
8.
Phew. So every time we go to Paris and we visit, we generally go on the number 7. So I'm safe. I'm not going to be murdered.
Yes, it was at the end of the line as well at the time. It's a bit longer now, but it was at the end of the line in the southeast of Paris, the southeast corner of Paris. It was between Porte de Charenton and Porte Dorée. The reason why it's been referred to as the perfect murder is, first of all, it was the first ever murder in the subway. Mm-hmm. So it took a long time to get to the first one, 30 odd years or so.
Oh, that's not bad.
Yeah, and also there's never been any good suspect, there's never been any clues, there's never been anything. Mm-hmm. Nobody's ever been arrested, barely questioned.
Wow, okay.
So whoever did it got away with it.
Okay.
And that was the perfect murder.
Right.
And that made a lot of noise at the time, but now most people have forgotten. So, as I said, it happened on the 16th of May 1937. Okay. It was line 8 between the Porte de Charenton and Porte Dorée, and it happened at 6:27 p.m.
All right, okay, so we're still talking.
It was a Sunday.
Oh, Sunday.
It was a
right,
Sunday.
Okay.
And it happened in the car number 382.
Okay.
Not very important, but that's a fact for you. So the way I'll tell you how it happened, and then we can try to solve it, I guess. In Porte Dorée, 6 passengers got onto the train. Okay. And they noticed a redhead woman wearing a green dress. That might be fashion faux pas, I don't know. And she seemed asleep. And people didn't really pay attention to her. She was just sitting there. Mm. When the train moved away from the station, she started to lean and fell on the floor in a puddle of blood. And then that's how they realised, something is not right here.
I thought she would have really stood out because she had red hair. Red hair and
she had a big hat, so people didn't really see her face. Actually, everybody, the 6 people who were questioned said, well, she seemed to be asleep. She was just sitting there, her head down, her hat up, and that was it. Okay. So everybody thought she was asleep until she fell on the floor in a big puddle of blood.
Ginger, Ginger.
And when they got closer, they realised that she had a knife in her neck.
In her neck?
Yes.
Wow.
It was so violent when she was stabbed that it cut the spinal cord.
Holy crap.
But she was still alive.
Oh
she wasn't dead.
Oh, no.
She was unconscious at that time.
Poor woman.
So they stopped the train, call for emergencies, and an ambulance turns up. She's picked up, but she dies before she gets to the hospital. Oh, God. So, and it was a military doctor that first looked at her, but that's not relevant to the story. So the question, that's the murder. That's all we know about the murder. So the question is, how could she be killed? Because the first 6 passengers that got up into the train said didn't see anybody apart from her. The train had just arrived from the end station of the line, so it was really the first stop after the end of the line.
Oh, okay.
And that was it. So nobody knows anything at that point.
Did anybody get off just before she was discovered?
No.
So
no.
Just purely
it got into the station,
and then those 6 people
the doors
got
open,
on.
And then 6 people come up, but nobody comes down.
Okay.
She was on her own when the train arrived.
Uh-huh. Is it very much like when we get on the end of the number 7 line? Is the train sits there for 2 or 3 minutes before it goes? So she could have been stabbed in the previous station, and the person got off.
It would have been that way. The train would have been sitting at the end of the line until it was time to start. Yeah. And it was about the same as now. It was about 3 minutes also.
So realistically, she was probably stabbed in that previous station.
Well, we don't know. I'll tell you a bit more about her.
Okay.
First, who she was, because it's fairly important to solve the murder. So she was called Laetitia Marie-Joséphine Nourissa.
Wow, okay.
She was born in Oias, or Oiace, I don't know, in Italy. So her parents were Italian. Her dad was a farmer. in Italy.
Bloody immigrants.
And they immigrated to France with her and her 3 sisters and brothers.
Okay.
She also was known as Yolande. That was her
nickname.
Kind of nickname. That's how she was known in some areas. She got married in 1930 to Jules Toureaux, that's her surname. He was a potter, and he dies of TB in 1935, so 5 years after the wedding.
Okay.
2 years before she was murdered.
Oh, no.
She's naturalized French through her marriage, and that marriage was kept secret until her husband died, because her father-in-law didn't approve of the marriage. He was apparently a rich industrialist, and he didn't approve of her. Nobody knew about their marriage.
Didn't approve of a working man then?
Probably.
A tradesman?
Well, no, it's her father-in-law didn't approve of her.
Okay.
So it's her that wasn't approved of.
Okay.
So that's why they kept it secret for 5 years, I guess. In 1937, what's known of her is that she's a factory worker in Saint-Ouen, near Paris. Maybe West, I can't remember. And at night, she's known to go to dance halls, for example, that's called Ganguette at the time, and that's where she uses the name Yolande. Also, what's kind of known about her is that she has 2 lovers at the time. A soldier who's based on the ligne Maginot between France and Germany.
Right,
Remember, that's before the Second World War.
Yeah.
That was the line built to stop the Germans.
Yeah, that worked.
Well, they went round it.
True.
Nobody expected that. And the other one is a sailor who's based in Toulon, so the Mediterranean coast, southeast.
Yeah.
That's where the French Navy is based at the time.
Okay.
And that's where it's going to sink itself when the Germans arrive, so that the Germans didn't get... It was the second largest navy in the world at the time, after the British one, and the military didn't want the Germans to get their hands on all the
So they fell on their swords and sunk their own ships.
They sunk all their boats, except the ones that had escaped to Algeria. So that's it. That's all that's known about her when you talk to people who know her. She's apparently without any problems. She has no enemies. She has no reason to be stabbed. No reason to die in the subway. So the inquiry starts.
Okay.
And it's led by the commissioner called Badin, who works on it for 2 years. It has to be said that it really feels like the police didn't want to know who killed her, because they did pretty much everything wrong from the start.
Oh, God.
When they started, they got to the subway station, everybody was there. They keep everybody in the station, and after a while, some say about half an hour, they let everybody go without even talking to them. They questioned a few people, but really only the people that were in the train with her, but that's about it.
Well, that seems a bit stupid.
They don't ask people that were on the station, don't ask people that were in the other cars in the train. Yeah. They don't do anything really.
So they don't even take names and addresses of people?
They have no idea who was in the train station at the time. Yes. So it does feel like they're just, okay, well, she's dead, who cares? And because there's no really forensics at the time, we're talking 1937, so they had fingerprints if they tried, but that's about it.
Yeah, and fingerprints in a public space are going to be utterly useless, I guess, other than just being on the murder weapon, I guess.
Yes, but as far as I know, they don't even check that. And because they don't ask questions to witnesses or anything, that's it. The inquiry goes absolutely nowhere.
Do you think it's because she was just working class widower?
We don't know, because the commissioner officially did try to solve it. He worked on it officially again for 2 years, but really doesn't have much to show for it. When you look at the scene, the thing that is obvious is that there was no struggle. She was stabbed. She didn't defend herself. She didn't do anything after she was stabbed. There's just no struggle. So we can wonder, did she see nothing coming? Did she know the person and didn't expect it to happen? We really don't know.
If it was a spinal injury, though, perhaps she couldn't move.
But after she was stabbed, yes. And as far as I know, she was only stabbed once, according to the inquiry at that time. That
must have been a lot of force. You're not talking a small woman doing it. I mean,
it's a lot of force and a lot of luck, because he would have had to stab her just between the vertebrae, because otherwise you hit the bone and that's it, you break your knife. So it must have been fairly lucky in between two vertebrae and very deep. And it was from the side, from her left side, as far as I remember. So she wasn't stabbed from the back. She was stabbed from her left side.
Strange. You would notice, I mean, that's not peripheral view. That's...
Yes. And also it cut, obviously, the artery and
Yes.
that's how she died. That's why there was a massive puddle of blood fell on the ground.
The thing is, if somebody did that, surely there'd be a lot of arterial spurt. Surely somebody would have had splash.
Well,
would have had blood on them.
There are photos of the scene, and you can see a big giant puddle on the floor.
Wow, yeah.
But that's it. It doesn't look like there's blood on the windows, blood on the roof.
No, it does look
Nothing.
very clean.
Yeah, but it's a lot of blood.
Yes.
Anyway.
Well, it would be, wouldn't it?
So that's it. We really don't know how it happened, and it's never really solved by the inquiry. They don't think that it was a robbery either, because she still has her purse when she's discovered. She has 100 francs in it, which is quite a lot of money at the time, in 1937. She has all her jewellery. Nothing's been apparently taken from her. And it's not a sexual attack either. They don't find anything. She's still dressed as she was. And so they really have absolutely no clue why that happened. So the police then starts to ask questions around, because they really have to try at least.
Yeah.
They go and see the owner of the place where she went dancing on the Sunday afternoon, which is called L'Amitage. The owner testifies that he saw her in the afternoon and he saw her leave, and she left alone, according to him. She wasn't with someone, she wasn't followed by anyone. And on the way out, she chatted with 3 other girls. So she seemed okay, she didn't seem worried or anything like that. She doesn't seem to have met anyone specifically in the afternoon. She just did what she normally did. She didn't seem to have an appointment or a date or anything in the dance hall. So as far as the owner of the place, he saw her. She was normal. She didn't look worried. She didn't do anything unusual. She left and she jumped on the bus. And that's all we know. After that, she's dead. They find the bus driver, and he confirms that she got on the bus at 6:16 in the afternoon. And when she got off the bus, he saw her go down the subway.
Okay.
So far, everything matches what we know. She never talks to anyone specifically. She's never, worried or anything. She just acts totally normally. She just goes from the dance hall to the bus to the subway. Then they eventually try to track down witnesses. So at Porte Dorée, which is the second station, so not where she got on the train, but the next one, everybody confirms that they didn't see anybody come up or come down off the coach.
At that point, we're all looking, could you walk in between the carriages? Was it?
Yes, but nobody did that, according to witnesses again.
Okay.
That's not possible. That's not how it happened. But
in
we
theory...
know it's not the case. In theory, it would have been possible, but
Yeah.
it's not the case. Because she was in a first-class car as well. And that's why she was on her own, because very few people were using them. So the next car was second class, and there were people in there, and they didn't see anything happen, didn't see anybody come from her car, didn't see anybody come on or off the train. So when they start looking for witnesses, they've managed to find them, but they didn't see anything. Nobody saw anything. She was just dead by magic, like she was killed by a ghost. Nobody knows what happened. The main theory is that she was killed between the 2 stations, because that's the most logical. She was alive enough to get on the train, and then she was dead at the next station. So people assume that she was killed between the 2 stations.
Okay.
But they have the problem that nobody got off the train.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, isn't it?
So they have no idea where things are going there. Of course, at the time, you have all the newspapers all have their theory, and because it was the first murder in the subway, it makes quite a lot of noise at the time. So all the newspapers are running headlines for a few weeks on the subject, and they all have their theories. So some of them say that she has to be stabbed before she gets on the train, and she just gets on the train anyway. Some say she has to be stabbed when she's on the train, but then where's the murderer? Some say she must have been killed between 2 stations, but again, where's the murderer? It must be somewhere. So lots of theories are going around, but really none of them explains everything, given what we know.
If she got stabbed before she got on the train, then there would be
You would expect some blood.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, but there's no report of blood in the first station in Port de Charenton.
Okay.
So going nowhere in the subway. So going nowhere in the subway and with witnesses, then they start looking into her to try to understand at least why it happened, even if they can't explain how.
Yeah, if it wasn't a random attack, then...
Yes. So they look into her two lovers, which are known. As we know from Provenza in...
it's always the husband.
It's always the husband. So there's René, who's the sailor in Toulon, but he has an alibi. He was in the south at the time, and the soldiers with him corroborate what he says. Yes, he was with us. He couldn't be in Paris.
Yeah, and in the 30s, that's a long journey.
Oh, that would be a 10-hour journey, yes, by train, yes. So it can't be him. Jean is the other soldier, the one at Maginot. He was on 24-hour leave at the time, but it is established, and I didn't find how, that it couldn't be him either. He wasn't.
Okay. He had a good enough alibi.
He must have had a good enough alibi, or maybe he was somewhere else or something. But anyway, the police decided it can't be him either. So that these two, the only two people we know in her life, ruled out.
Okay.
So that's that. So after that, they look into her employment, and they discover that she's not always quickly clean.
Well, she's seeing two blokes at the same time, so...
Yes, but it was fairly common in the dance halls at the time.
Oh, yeah,
because that's where people met. So it wasn't uncommon to have several boyfriends, especially when they were soldiers and they were away for months and months and months at a time. So no, it wasn't that uncommon, so they don't really think much of it at the time. So after that, they look into her employment, and her employers say, oh, she's all great and we have no problem with her, and... But they discover that she has 4 different lives.
Okay.
So she's working in a wax factory, I think it was. That's her official employment.
Okay.
But she also was spying for her employer on the co-workers. And that's why she was working under the name Yolande. So Yolande is the name she was using to go dancing, but it's also the name she was using when she was employed at the factory.
I see.
That's not her real name. So it is established by Paris Soir, which is a newspaper at the time, on the 19th of May, that she is spying for employers. And they discover that because she was recommended by a cop and a PI for her employment. So they think, that is weird.
Yeah, that is very strange.
A basic factory worker recommended by cops. So they dig a bit more and they discover that, yes, she was spying for management, reporting on other employees, because it was the time where in France you had a very active left-wing, communist mainly, and it's a year after what's called the Front Populaire, which was a left-wing group of parties who took power in 1936, so it's SFIO, which became the Socialist Party, Communist, and the Radical de Gauche. So essentially all the left parties managed to band together and take power.
So when Germany's swinging one way, France is completely swinging the other way.
Yes. And that's where, for example, the 39-hour week was started. Before that, it was 48, I think.
Wow.
It's still 48 in the UK officially, I think. But anyway, yeah.
Wow.
So 36 is also when people started having paid holidays. 1 week or 2 weeks. 2 weeks, I think it was. So that was 1936, so that's the year after. So there's a lot of left-wing grumble in France at the time, and that's probably why the owners of the factory wanted to know what the employees were doing.
Yeah, they were trying to weed out the malcontents.
Yeah, exactly. So she was spying for them. Her second life is that she spends her nights dancing in these dance halls and meets people.
Is that meet between air bunnies, or is it just...
Well, there's no... For a while, the press tried to make her look really bad, but eventually they had to admit that there was nothing special about it.
I mean, is it she was meeting people the way the Black Dahlia was meeting people? That kind of like you were dancing for money and for dinner, essentially. And
she was making money sometimes. She was paid as a partner once in a while. Okay. But also that was still normal. When you could dance, you were sometimes paid to do so by people who didn't have a partner. So there was nothing special there. Okay. Her boyfriends were actual boyfriends, so it's not like she was taking their money or anything. No. So The press tried to make her look bad, but eventually
she was normal.
she had to admit she was doing what the 29-year-old woman, single woman would do. Mm-hmm. So there was nothing special, but they tried. There was lots of articles about how she was had low reputation and all that, but really there was nothing special. They also discovered when they dug into her life that she was going to the Italian embassy in secret once a month also. Remember, she's Italian originally. Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm. There's two versions of this. One is we don't know really why she was going to the embassy because there's no trace of it. It's not like there's records. It's possible, according to others, that she was spying for Mussolini or for the Secret Service, the Italian Secret Services.
So she was spying for the left and for the right.
Yes, essentially that's what some people are saying. Again, there's no trace of it, but there's been people working in the Italian Secret Services saying yes, she was spying for us. But it's not like, again, there's a ledger, so it's just hearsay. Some people say that she was doing that, but nobody knows. It's sure that she was going to the embassy once a month, but nobody knows really why. So it is a bit strange. So that's her third life. Also, she was working once in a while for a PI agency, hence her work recommendation.
Oh, yes.
It was called RUFFI, RUFFI. At first, the rumor is that she worked on very sensitive cases, like spying cases and stuff. But when they interview the owner, he says that no, she was just doing mostly following people when the wife was suspecting the husband, or vice versa. Yes, yeah. Just general, very low level thing. The owner says there's just no way that could have justified being murdered, really. No. She's just keeping an eye on people. But
her three other supposed lives were very heavily into surveillance.
Yes, yes. So this one is more adultery.
Yes.
The Italian embassy is more spying.
Yes.
And the factory worker spying is more like political.
Yeah.
Yes. And she only, according to the owner, she only worked for him from June to November 36. So at that point, because we're in May 37, she had already stopped working for him for 6 or 7 months.
So it's not likely to be an angry
the
husband.
The police decide that
that's a dead end.
Yeah. It's not likely that somebody who's followed for adultery would kill her, really, or even would know about her.
Oh, that's true.
So,
she's not very good at it.
She's not very good at it, yes. And finally, she's also discovered to have links to the far right in France, especially with a group called Cagoule.
Okay.
Cagoule is like balaclava.
Okay.
Also what kids have when they're kids, with the hole in the face and everything is covered. That's what Cagoule is in France. It's a clandestine political military organization in France.
Wow.
It has strong links with terrorist circles in the 30s. They're never called really the Cagoule. Cagoule is the name a journalist and politician gave them because it was condescending. It was to show his contempt for them.
Yes.
So he made up that term, and because he's a journalist, he wrote it in newspapers and it stuck. But officially, they call themselves OSAN, which is an acronym. I can't remember what it means. OXA, also an acronym. The journalist was called Maurice Pujol. So they are very active. They are implicated in murders and bombs and stuff. And they even tried to attempt a coup in November 37, so after she's dead.
Yeah.
But it didn't work, mainly because the circumstances changed at the last minute. So only half the people really took part, and it just fell down and nothing happened. But they tried to organize a coup in 37, and in 37 could possibly have worked. So that's all her lives. So
she's a busy lady.
She's very busy. She's not clean, but really at the moment there's just nothing.
No.
The most likely explanation is her activities with the far right, but even then nobody says anything about her that would justify it.
Yeah.
They interview people they know are part of the organization and snitches and stuff, and none of them says, no, she didn't do anything, she was just there. So that's it. So she has an interesting life, but nothing that would justify being murdered. That's the way the investigation goes from 37 to 39, and in 39 because of the start of the war. That's the end of it.
Yeah, everything grinds to a halt.
The conclusion of the investigation is there's been 1,980 anonymous letters on the case.
Wow.
But
None of them
No.
lead to anything.
There's just nothing.
No.
It just remains unsolved forever. And that's it. That's the end of the investigation. We don't know who did it. But things happen afterwards.
Okay.
On the 19th of May 37, so that's the next day, her brother-in-law, Monsieur Barlow, who's a taxi driver, says in the Figaro newspaper that he knows who murdered her, but he doesn't want to say because he wants to find him and he wants to get revenge.
Okay.
He doesn't give any details, and that's it. We never hear again from him.
No.
So we don't know if he actually did know or if he was just talking in newspapers.
Yeah, it sounds like he said something in the heat of the moment and then...
We don't know. Nobody is linked to her murder. Nobody's killed in relation to that as far as we know.
No.
And is never interviewed again, and it just disappears. That's it. In March 48, so 11 years later, there's a guy who's in a mental hospital who confesses to her murder. The police doesn't take it seriously.
Well, no, you wouldn't, would you?
But, now that's the interesting bit. In 1962...
Wow, that's a long time.
That's a long time later.
Yeah.
There's a person who remains anonymous, who describes himself as a doctor born in 1915 in Perpignan, who sends a letter to the police and confesses to the crime. But the difference between the guy who's in the nut house is he gives a lot of details.
Okay.
So he describes it as a crime of passion because he knew her and he tried to court her, but it didn't work. She didn't want him. She was pushing him away all the time. And he had a meeting with her at the time on the day, but she decided not to go, so she told him, no, I'm not going. He had met her in November 36, so he's known her for about 7 months or so. And it was shortly after he moved to Paris, because he was born in Perpignan. He trained as a doctor in Perpignan. His dad was rich, so he was allowed to move to Paris, and all expenses paid by his dad. So he moves up in November 36, and that's pretty much as soon as he meets her in the dancing halls. On the 2nd of May, they had met in Hermitage, so that's one of her main dancing hall places, and he convinced her at the time to have a date on the 16th and have dinner. Okay. That's the day she died. Yeah. But in the morning, as I said, she just calls him...
and calls it all off.
Yeah, she even meets him in the bar in the morning, and they talk, and she says, no, I'm not going to meet you tonight. So she also confesses that she sees another man, Jean. He doesn't know who that is. Okay. We know he's one of the two boyfriends, the soldier.
Oh, yes. Uh-huh.
And she implies that she's going to meet him in the evening. So he's angry, very angry. He spent several hours raging about not being able to see her in the evening. And he says in the letter that after a few hours, the hot rage was replaced by cold anger, and that was more scary. So at the end of the afternoon, he decides to go to the Hermitage anyway. Okay. Because he suspects that she might go there without him. Yeah. And he puts a knife. It's a Laguiole. It's a French brand of knives. It's folding knives.
Oh, like a flick knife.
Yeah, they're very famous. That he had bought a while back with one of his friends to impress girls. Okay. Apparently. But he's very timid, so when he gets to the dance hall, he doesn't talk to anyone, doesn't talk to her, nobody notices him. And he decides to wait for her outside. And at 6, when she comes out and jumps on the bus, he follows her. Okay. And Port de Charenton, she goes off the bus. Yeah. We know that. It's been confirmed by the driver. Goes into the subway. We know that as well. It's been confirmed. And he continues to follow her, and she never notices him. She gets into the subway. He follows her. And as soon as she's seated, he calls her name. She turns towards him, and he stabs her. Okay. And he says she didn't have time to make a noise. So he puts her back up on a chair. Okay. So that she's sitting, like people have seen her when they got on the train at the next station. Runs off just before the door closes. Uh-huh. And goes to the next car. Ah, okay. But nobody saw that happen. Okay. At Port d'Oreille, he knows that she's been discovered because he can see all the commotion and people shouting and all that. But he doesn't know yet if she's dead.
Okay.
Because, of course, we know at the station she was still alive. She was alive until the ambulance arrived.
Yeah.
So everybody's asked off the train, and they're made to wait. And after about 30 minutes, they let go. And he says specifically in the letter that the police didn't do their job. They didn't question people. Because he was so scared at the time. If they had asked, he says in the letter, if they had asked him if he killed her, he would have said yes.
Tent, yes. And
he was sure that if they just had asked him, he would have said yes.
Yes. Did you see anything? Yes. I saw myself plunging the knife into her neck.
And also he learns in the press later that she had cancelled her date with Jean in the evening. So he killed her, but she wasn't going to meet anybody anyway. So he follows the news in the press for a few days because he's really worried that he's going to be found out. But he notices that the police has no clue, nobody knows anything, and it's already called the perfect murder. So he relaxes, and after a few months, everything's forgotten. She's not in the press anymore. The case is still being investigated, but there's just no noise about it. And that's it. He gets on with his life. And he says that at the time of sending the letter, he's married. He has kids. He has grandkids. But his actions are weighing on his conscience. So he needed to tell someone, so he decided to send a letter to the police.
But did they ever identify exactly who he was?
No, because the problem was the statute of limitations had run out at the time. 1962 was long enough after 37. So even if the police wanted to do something, they had no case. It was too late. So the director of police, who was called Max Fernie, decided not to reopen the inquiry because the murder was gone. That was it. They couldn't do anything. They couldn't catch him for that murder. Is
that the case now? Is murder still?
No, I think murder is now. There's no statute of limitation for murder. Yes. I don't think for most of Europe.
Yeah.
So now, yes, it could be investigated again. But at the time, there was no point because even if they managed to know who he was, that was it. They couldn't do anything about it.
That sounds like a plausible explanation.
Well, the fact that he has so many details that work perfectly with what we know.
She was followed, and that makes sense. But I was so sure that somebody had stabbed her when they were still in the actual terminus and just never got back off the train and just left.
That's exactly what happened, but he went to the next car.
He did. I don't understand why he just didn't leave. Why he didn't
it's not in the letter. I read the whole letter and he doesn't explain why he stayed around because he could have just left.
Exactly. It just seemed like lunacy to me.
Yeah, that was risky to go to the next car and then when the police arrives and stops everybody, then
I guess once you've stabbed somebody, I guess your rational brain is...
Well, he was saying himself he was totally out of it. He just didn't know what was going on at the time.
It did, and it's very much a crime of passion, isn't it? It's just so violent.
But that's how he explains it.
Yeah.
Yes.
But man... Certainly not something you could consider doing nowadays because the metro, no matter what time you get on, is busy.
But also there's no first class anymore. There was still first class when I was a kid. And usually these cars were empty because the tickets were way more expensive and who wants to pay more for running in the subway?
Was there much of a difference between the seats bigger? Or
no, they were about the same.
They just didn't have to put up with the hoi polloi.
Yeah, essentially yes. So it was a lot more expensive. It was usually empty or very quiet.
Yeah.
Same as the train tickets. The first class is usually a lot quieter, fewer people.
Less children.
Yes. So that's why the subway still says second class on all the cars because that's all there is now. There's no first class anymore. No. But at the time, there was first class and she was on her own.
Still, so many mistakes made by the police.
The police just didn't care. Because really, stopping everybody on the train and in the station, keeping them for a while, and then letting them go without even taking their names.
That's just insane.
That's crazy. Yeah. That's really the basic step of any cop. Get all the names so they can get them again. If suddenly you think, oh, I need to know that, you can find these people. No, they didn't even ask that dude anything.
Exactly.
And he was there.
Yes, and finally did eat away at him. It has to be him, hasn't it, really?
Well, it's still unsolved and it will be unsolved forever because... Well, can you consider the confession true? Who knows?
I would have had more respect for him if he hadn't have gone to the next carriage, and I would have said, that's a perfect murder, but for me, that doesn't... he's very foolish for even connecting himself with the train by being on it, but poor woman, though.
He obviously didn't plan it really
No.
It wasn't premeditated. He had the knife with him, yes.
Yeah, that's it.
But he decided to take it just before he left. And he didn't know what he was going to do. He just wanted to see what she was doing. And he saw her in the dance hall and waited for her. And she wasn't with anybody.
Yeah.
He just followed her.
And if you're not going to have me, then no one else is going to have you.
Yeah, essentially that's it.
Yeah.
It's not premeditated. I don't think it would go for murder 1 in the US. It would be murder, second-degree murder maybe, even manslaughter possibly.
Yeah, well, if he almost has the knife, then yeah, you can't prove that it was entirely...
Well, he didn't buy it for the murder. He had bought it ages ago. Because he says in his letter as well that when he moved to Paris, he was like the countryside bumpkin, naive dude.
Oh, yeah.
So he met some not very nice people, and that's how he ended up buying a knife with them. But he didn't buy it to kill anyone. He certainly didn't buy it to kill her. He didn't even know her at the time.
No.
So he just happened to have that knife that he had bought a while back and just took it with him, and he ended up stabbing her. But that wasn't the plan.
Well,
so that's it. That's the perfect murder.
Yeah, a moral of the story is be careful who you dance with.
Yes.
Okay, well that's it for this week. Join us next week when we'll have another enthralling French case. Goodbye.